I watched the news break on every screen in the building at exactly 2:47 p.m. My former best friend's face, pale, sweating, desperate, being led out of the company we built together in handcuffs. But I wasn't there to see it in person. I was 7,000 miles away, sitting on a beach in Thailand, holding a drink with a tiny umbrella, watching the live stream on my phone. The reporter kept saying words like embezzlement, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that every single piece of evidence they found I had planted, meticulously, methodically, over the course of 18 months. And the beautiful part? Every bit of it was real. He just didn't know he was doing it. My name is Aaron Walsh, and this is the story of how I destroyed the man who was closer to me than my own brother. It started the way most great friendships do, with shared misery. Devon Hartley and I met during freshman orientation at Portland State University. We were both standing in the wrong line for student IDs, both completely lost, both pretending we had everything figured out. He was wearing a vintage Radiohead shirt that was 2 sizes too big, and I had shown up in what I thought was college casual, but was actually my dad's old business clothes. We looked ridiculous for entirely different reasons. "You lost too?" he asked, grinning. "Strategically exploring my options," I replied. He laughed, this genuine, unreserved laugh that made his whole face light up. "That's the best bullshit I've heard all day. I'm Devon." "Aaron." We shook hands, and just like that we were friends. That was 2009. We were both 18, both broke, both studying computer science because we'd grown up building our own gaming PCs and figured we might as well get paid for understanding technology. We were assigned to the same dorm floor through pure coincidence, and by the end of the first semester, we were inseparable. Devon was everything I wasn't. Charismatic, effortlessly social, the kind of guy who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 12 new friends. I was quieter, more analytical, comfortable with code and systems, but awkward with people. We balanced each other perfectly. He'd drag me to parties I'd never have attended on my own. I'd help him actually pass his classes. He taught me how to talk to people, how to read a room, how to sell an idea. I taught him discipline, strategic thinking, how to see 3 moves ahead. We became more than friends. We became partners in everything. "You're the brains, I'm the charm," he used to say. "Together, we're unstoppable." And for a long time, he was right. We spent our college years doing what ambitious tech students do, building apps that went nowhere, pitching startup ideas to anyone who'd listen, surviving on ramen and ambition. We had this running joke that we'd either end up millionaires or living in his mum's basement until we were 40. There was no middle ground. Junior year, we finally built something that worked. It was Devon's idea initially, a project management platform specifically designed for creative agencies. He'd been freelancing for a small marketing firm and kept complaining about how clunky and overcomplicated their workflow tools were. "Everything's built for tech companies or corporations," he said one night, sprawled across our shared apartment couch. "But creative teams work differently. They need something visual, intuitive, something that doesn't feel like homework." "So build it," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "We should build it," he corrected. "I'll design the user experience. You make it actually work." That was how we operated. He'd have the vision, the big idea. I'd figure out how to make it real. We called it prism work. We spent every spare moment on it, nights, weekends, the entire summer between junior and senior year. Devon would sketch interfaces and user flows, talking through every detail. I'd translate his sketches into functional code, building the back-end infrastructure, making sure everything was fast and stable. By senior year, we had a working prototype. Devon convinced 3 local agencies to try it for free. They loved it. One of them loved it so much they offered to pay us. Then another, then 5 more. We graduated in 2013 with a product that actually made money. Not much, barely enough to cover rent and food, but it was real. We weren't just 2 kids with a dream anymore. We were legitimate. "We're doing this," Devon said the night after graduation, sitting on the roof of our apartment building, sharing a bottle of cheap champagne. "We're actually fucking doing this." "We haven't done anything yet," I said, ever the realist. "Exactly." He grinned, that same infectious grin from freshman orientation. "That's the best part. Everything's still ahead of us." He raised his plastic cup. I raised mine. "To prison work," he said. "To partnership," I added. "To brotherhood," he finished. We clinked cups, and I felt something I'd rarely felt before. Absolute certainty. This was it. This was what I was meant to do, and Devon was who I was meant to do it with. Now, the early years were brutal. We rented a tiny office space in southeast Portland, barely more than a closet with windows. We worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. Devon handled sales, marketing, and customer relationships. I built new features, fixed bugs, kept the servers running. Money was always tight. There were months we paid ourselves nothing so we could keep the lights on, months we lived on dollar pizza and grocery store sandwiches, months I seriously considered giving up and getting a normal job. But Devon never wavered. "This is the part they don't show you in the success stories," he'd say during the worst stretches. "The part where it sucks, and you're broke and nobody believes in you except you. This is what separates the people who make it from the people who quit." He had this way of turning every setback into motivation. Client cancellation? Opportunity to improve the product? Technical failure, chance to build something more robust, rejected by investors, proof we didn't need them. His optimism was infectious, even when I knew the numbers looked terrible, even when I was the one who actually dealt with the numbers. By year 2, we had 30 clients. By year 3, we had over 100. Small agencies mostly, but they were loyal and they paid on time. We hired our first employee, a customer support specialist named Melissa, who thought our scrappy startup energy was charming. Then a designer, then another developer. We were growing. Devon was the face of the company. He'd go to industry conferences, networking events, pitch meetings. He was incredible at it, funny, authentic, passionate. People loved him. He'd come back with leads, with contacts, with opportunities. I was the foundation. I built the architecture that scaled as we grew. I hired the technical team. I made sure we delivered on every promise Devon made. We were named one of Portland's top 10 startups to watch in 2015. Forbes mentioned us in an article about innovative tools for the creative economy. We raised our first round of venture capital, $2.3 million from a firm in Seattle. Everything was working, and through it all, Devon and I remained best friends. We celebrated every win together, commiserated over every loss. We knew each other's rhythms, our strengths and weaknesses, our dreams and fears. He was the best man at my wedding in 2016. I was the best man at his in 2017. His wife, Rachel, was a graphic designer he'd met at a conference. Smart, funny, creative, perfect for him. My wife, Sophie, was a teacher I'd met through mutual friends. Patient, grounded, kind, perfect for me. The four of us would have dinner every Friday night, alternating between our houses. We'd talk about work, but also about everything else. Travel plans, bad movies, stupid arguments we'd seen on the internet, normal stuff, friend stuff. "You know what's crazy?" Devon said one Friday night in early 2018, slightly drunk on wine. "We're actually living the dream, like literally. We built something from nothing. We're our own bosses. We're doing well. We married amazing women. When did we become the success story?" "When you stopped being afraid to call it that," Rachel said, kissing his cheek. Sophie smiled at me across the table. I smiled back. Devon was right. We were living the dream. I should have known it was too perfect to last. The first crack appeared in March 2018. It was small, barely noticeable, the kind of thing you almost convince yourself you imagined. We'd just closed a major deal, a partnership with a national agency network that would bring Prism work to over 200 new clients. It was huge, our biggest win ever. Devon had negotiated it almost entirely on his own, spending months building the relationship. We celebrated at the office with the whole team, champagne, catered food, genuine excitement. This was the moment that would take us from successful startup to legitimate company. The next morning, I was going through the contract details, making sure all the technical integration points were clear. I needed to ask Devon a question about one of the pricing tiers, so I walked to his office. The door was closed, which was unusual. Devon usually kept it open. Accessible leadership, he called it. I could hear his voice inside, low and intense. I knocked. Silence. Then, "Just a minute." 30 seconds later, he opened the door. His phone was face down on his desk. His expression was normal, friendly, relaxed. But something in his eyes looked off, guarded. "Hey, what's up?" he asked. "The Cornerstone contract? I need to clarify the enterprise tier pricing structure." "Oh, right, yeah, let me pull it up." He seemed normal. The conversation was normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd interrupted something. I pushed it aside. We were busy. We were stressed. Everyone was entitled to a private phone call. 2 weeks later, I noticed Devon leaving the office early on a Thursday afternoon. Not unusual. He often had client meetings, investor calls, industry events. But this time, he didn't mention where he was going, didn't put it on our shared calendar. When I asked him about it the next day, he said he'd been meeting with a potential strategic partner and hadn't wanted to jinx it by talking about it too early. Reasonable explanation. But then it happened again and again. These unexplained absences, these gaps in his schedule. Never long, an hour here, 2 hours there, always with plausible explanations. I told myself I was being paranoid. Devon and I had built this company together. We were brothers. If something was wrong, he'd tell me. In May, our CFO, Janet, a woman we'd hired 6 months earlier to help manage our growing finances, asked to speak with me privately. "I need you to look at something," she said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. It was our expense reports, specifically Devon's expense reports. "I'm seeing some inconsistencies," Janet said carefully. "Charges that don't quite match the descriptions, receipts that seem unusual for business expenses." I looked at the highlighted entries, expensive restaurant charges labeled as client dinners with no client names, hotel stays in the city we already lived in, car service charges at odd hours. "Maybe he's just being sloppy with documentation," I said, feeling defensive. "You know Devon, he's not great with administrative details." "That's possible," Janet said, "but given the amounts involved, I think we should ask him to provide more detailed accounting, just to keep everything clean for audit purposes. She was right, of course. We had investors now, we had fiduciary responsibilities, but the conversation felt wrong, like we were investigating my best friend. "I'll talk to him," I said. I didn't talk to him. I told myself I'd do it later when the timing was better, when we weren't so busy, when it wouldn't feel like an accusation. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what it might mean. Afraid of the possibility that something was wrong. So I ignored it. June 2018 was when everything shifted. We were preparing for our Series B funding round, aiming to raise $15 million to accelerate growth, expand the team, maybe open an office in San Francisco. Devon was leading the investor pitches. He was in his element, telling our story, painting the vision of what prison work could become. We came back from the meeting in Silicon Valley, absolutely buzzing. Aaron, we're going to get it. He said, practically vibrant. I met with Red Point Ventures today. They're in. They're fucking in. They want to lead the round. That's amazing, I said. And I meant it. Redpoint was exactly the kind of institutional investor we needed. "There's one thing, though," Devon said, his tone shifting slightly. "They want to see some organizational changes, professionalization, they called it. They think we need to bring in experienced executives for some key positions." "Like what?" "VP of Sales, Chief Revenue Officer, maybe a new CTO with experience scaling companies past our stage." The last one hit me like cold water. "A new CTO," I said slowly. "To replace me?" "Not replace," Devon said quickly. "You'd move to Chief Technology Officer, more strategic level. The new CTO would handle day-to-day technical operations." "That is replacement, Devon, just with better PR." "It's evolution," he said, his voice taking on that persuasive quality he used with clients. "We're not a scrappy startup anymore. We're a real company. We need people who've done this before at scale. You're incredible at what you do, Aaron, but you've never scaled a company to 100 million in revenue. These investors have. They know what works." Every word was reasonable, every word made business sense, and every word felt like betrayal. "We built this company," I said, "you and me, from nothing, and now you want to push me aside because some venture capital guys think I'm not experienced enough?" "I'm not pushing you aside. I'm trying to set us up for success. This is bigger than ego, Aaron. This is about building something that lasts. It's not about ego. It's about trust. It's about partnership. And I'm your partner. That's why I'm telling you this instead of just letting the investors make it a condition of funding. I want you on board with this. I want us to make this decision together." He sounded sincere. He looked sincere. Maybe he even believed it. But something in my gut told me this wasn't about business evolution. This was about something else. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course. Take your time. We don't need to decide anything today." But the damage was done. A seed of doubt had been planted. I started paying attention differently after that conversation. I noticed Devon taking more calls behind closed doors. Noticed him being vague about who he was meeting with. Noticed him arriving late and leaving early more frequently. I noticed our expenses continuing to show irregularities, more unexplained charges, more missing documentation. I noticed him being more defensive when I asked questions about company direction, more dismissive of my concerns, more willing to override my technical judgment with investor expectations. And I noticed something else, something I couldn't quite name, a distance growing between us, an invisible wall going up where there used to be complete transparency. Sophie noticed too. Is everything okay with you and Devon? She asked one night in July. Why do you ask? You seem tense when you talk about him, and you used to talk about him all the time. Now you barely mention him at all. We're just busy. Fundraising's stressful. Aaron. She looked at me with those patient, knowing eyes. I've known you for 8 years. I know when something's bothering you. I wanted to tell her everything, the weird absences, the expense issues, the suggestion that I step aside, but saying it out loud would make it real, would make it something I had to deal with. It's nothing, I said. Just normal business growing pains. She didn't believe me, but she let it go. I threw myself into work. If Devon was going to suggest I wasn't capable of scaling the company, I'd prove him wrong. I built new systems, optimized performance, documented everything obsessively. I worked until midnight most nights, came in on weekends. I was trying to make myself indispensable. What I didn't realize was that I was also isolating myself, pulling away from the parts of the company that weren't purely technical, ceding ground. In August, Devon announced in a leadership meeting that we were bringing in a consultant to assess our organizational structure. Just a fresh set of eyes, he said, someone objective who can help us identify where we need to strengthen. The consultant, a guy named Rick Thurston, from a boutique firm in Seattle, spent 2 weeks interviewing everyone, reviewing our processes, analyzing our metrics. His recommendation was exactly what Devon had suggested in June. We needed to professionalize our executive team, bring in experienced operators, create proper separation between strategy and execution. He specifically recommended that I transition to a Chief Innovation Officer role, focused on long-term technology vision rather than day-to-day operations. We'd hire a new CTO to manage the engineering team. Devon presented it to me like it was the consultant's idea, like it was objective analysis. But I knew better. You don't hire a consultant unless you already know what recommendation you want. You hire them to validate the decision you've already made. This is bullshit, I said, when Devon and I were alone in his office. It's business, Aaron. It's you pushing me out. I'm not pushing you out. You'd still be an executive. You'd still have equity. I'd still be irrelevant, I interrupted. You're taking away the one thing I'm actually good at and giving me a made-up title that means nothing. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Devon. We started this company together, equal partners, and now you're restructuring it so you're the only one who actually matters. His face hardened. I'm the one who brought in the investors. I'm the one who landed the major clients. I'm the one who's been building relationships while you've been hiding in your office writing code. Hiding! I felt my voice rising. I've been building the fucking product. You know, the thing that actually makes this company valuable. The thing that every client pays us for. And we're grateful for that. But we need more than a good product now. We need leadership that can take us to the next level. We. You keep saying we like this is a collective decision, but it's not. This is you deciding I'm not good enough. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Devon? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, almost sad. I'm saying that maybe our roles need to evolve. We're not college kids anymore, Aaron. We're running a real company with real responsibilities. And sometimes that means making hard choices. Hard choices, I repeated. Is that what you call stabbing your best friend in the back? Don't be dramatic. Dramatic? You're literally trying to remove me from the company I helped build. I'm trying to save the company we built. There's a difference. I stared at him. This person I'd known for almost a decade, this person I'd trusted more than anyone, and I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. I need time to think, I said. Take all the time you need, but Aaron, we need to make a decision before the funding closes. The investors are expecting organizational clarity. I left his office feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. For 2 weeks, I barely spoke to Devon. We communicated through email and Slack, avoided each other in the office. It was the longest we'd gone without really talking since we'd met. Sophie could see I was spiraling. Maybe you should just talk to him, she said. Really talk like you used to. There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about. You're best friends. You've been through everything together. Don't let business destroy that. He's already destroyed it, I said. But she was right. We needed to clear the air. So I asked Devon to have dinner. Just the two of us. No company talk, like old times. We met at our usual place, a Thai restaurant we'd been going to since college. For the first 20 minutes, we avoided anything serious, talked about a series we were both watching, about Rachel's new gallery show, about Sophie's school year starting. Then Devon said, I don't want things to be weird between us. They are weird, because you're trying to push me out of my own company. That's not what I'm doing, Aaron. I swear. I want us to succeed. And sometimes success requires change. Change that conveniently benefits you. He sighed. What do you want me to say? That I'm not ambitious? That I don't want to build something huge? Because I do. I've always wanted that. And I thought you did too. I do, but not at the cost of our friendship. Not at the cost of our partnership. It doesn't have to cost anything. We can still be partners. We can still be friends. We just have to adapt. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't read, something that felt like guilt or sadness or maybe just exhaustion. Are we okay? I asked. The question felt childish, but I needed to know. Of course we are, he said. We're always okay. We're brothers, remember? He smiled. I tried to smile back, but I didn't believe him, and I don't think he believed himself. September 2018 was when I started investigating. I didn't set out to spy on my best friend. I told myself I was just being thorough, just trying to understand what was really happening with the company finances. I asked Janet to pull detailed expense reports for the last 6 months, not just Devon's, everyone's, so it wouldn't seem targeted. But I paid special attention to his. The patterns were undeniable. Expensive charges with vague descriptions, restaurants, hotels, car services, always during times when he had no meetings on the calendar. One charge stood out, a hotel room at the Benson, a luxury hotel in downtown Portland, for $450, checked in at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, checked out at 6 p.m. the same day. We lived in Portland. Why would he need a hotel room for 4 hours in his own city? I felt sick looking at it. I started checking his calendar more carefully, cross-referencing it with his expense reports. The gaps were everywhere. Afternoons that were mysteriously blocked as external meetings with no details. Mornings where he arrived late with no explanation. I told myself there could be innocent explanations, client confidentiality, investor ND as legitimate business that required discretion. But my gut knew better. On a Thursday afternoon in late September, Devon left the office at 2:30 saying he had a meeting across town. I watched him walk to his car from my office window. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. I grabbed my keys and waited 30 seconds, then pulled out behind him, kept a safe distance, felt like a detective in a bad TV show, felt pathetic. He didn't drive to a restaurant or an office building. He drove to a residential neighborhood in northwest Portland. Parked on a quiet street lined with craftsman houses and mature trees. I parked a block away and watched. He got out of his car, looked around. God, he actually looked around to make sure no one was watching, and walked to a small house with blue shutters and a well-maintained garden. He had a key. He let himself in. I sat in my car, hands shaking, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to march up to that door and confront him. Part of me wanted to drive away and pretend I'd never seen this. I did neither. I just sat there, watching, waiting. 45 minutes later, the door opened. Devon came out first. Then a woman. She was younger than Rachel, mid-20s maybe, blonde, athletic, stylishly dressed. She kissed him goodbye, not a professional peck, but a real kiss. He smiled at her, that same warm, genuine smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Then he got in his car and drove away. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I'd just seen. Devon was having an affair. My best friend, Rachel's husband, the man who'd stood next to me at my wedding and promised to always be honest, always be loyal. He was a liar. I drove home in a daze, didn't tell Sophie what I'd discovered, didn't tell anyone. I just sat in our home office, staring at my computer screen, feeling like the entire foundation of my life had cracked. Everything I'd been worried about, the expenses, the distance, the secretiveness, it wasn't about business at all. Or maybe it was about both. Maybe the affair and the business changes were connected. Maybe Devon's desire to push me aside was about creating space for a version of himself that didn't include the people who knew him too well. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, mind racing, trying to figure out what to do with this information. Tell Rachel, confront Devon, pretend I didn't know. Every option felt impossible. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. Devon was in a good mood, cheerful, energetic, completely normal. "Morning," he said, popping his head into my office. "Got a minute? I want to run some numbers by you for the investor deck." "Sure," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. We talked about revenue projections and growth metrics. He was excited, animated, completely absorbed in the business, and I sat there thinking, you're a fraud, you're lying to your wife, maybe you're lying to me too. But I said nothing, just nodded and agreed, and pretended everything was fine. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I started tracking Devon's movements, checking his expenses obsessively, looking for patterns. I found them. The affair had been going on for at least 6 months. The woman, I eventually found out her name was Vanessa, she was a marketing manager at one of our client companies, wasn't the first either. There were charges that suggested others before her, other hotels, other unexplained absences. Devon wasn't just cheating on Rachel once. This was a pattern, a lifestyle. And he was using company money to fund it. Every hotel room, every expensive dinner, every car service to ferry him to his secret life. It was all getting charged back to prison work. He was stealing from the company we'd built together to pay for his affairs. The betrayal was complete. Not just of Rachel, but of me. Of every employee who trusted us. Of every investor who'd bet on our integrity. I should have exposed him immediately, should have gone to Rachel, to the board, to anyone. But I didn't. Because somewhere in the midst of my anger and hurt, a different feeling was growing, cold, patient rage. Devon had been my best friend, my brother, and he'd betrayed everything we'd built together. He'd tried to push me out while using company resources for his personal indulgences. He'd lied to everyone who loved him. If I exposed him now, he'd face consequences. He'd probably be fired. His marriage would implode. There would be scandal and embarrassment, but it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't make him feel the way I felt. Wouldn't make him understand the depth of what he'd destroyed. I wanted more than justice. I wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering, to lose everything the way I felt like I was losing everything. So I started planning. First step was documentation. I began keeping detailed records of everything, every suspicious expense, every gap in Devon's schedule, every inconsistency in his stories. I hired a private investigator, paid with my personal money, made sure there was no trail back to the company. His name was Gary Milford, a former cop who specialized in corporate investigations. I need to know everything, I told him. Where he goes, who he meets, how often, how long. You sure you want to know? Gary asked. Sometimes ignorance is easier. I'm sure. For 2 months, Gary followed Devon, photographed him, documented his movements. The report he delivered was comprehensive and devastating. 4 different women over the course of 18 months, dozens of meetings at hotels, apartments, even our office after hours, thousands of dollars in company money spent on maintaining these relationships. But it wasn't just the affairs. Gary had also uncovered something else. Devon had been having private meetings with investors, meetings I wasn't invited to. Meetings where he'd apparently been discussing the future of the company, specifically the version of the future where he was the sole visionary leader and I was a minor technical contributor being phased out. He was planning to completely marginalize me. The new CTO wasn't just about bringing in experienced leadership, it was about making me replaceable. Once the new person was in place and understood the technology, Devon could push me out entirely. My equity would vest over time anyway, so I'd be financially fine, but I'd have no role, no voice, no stake in the company I'd helped build. It was a coup, slow and subtle, but unmistakable. Reading Gary's report, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion crystallized into something harder, colder. Devon had made his choice. Now I'd make mine. I spent December 2018 and January 2019 preparing. First, I needed to secure my position. Devon wanted me out, but I still had leverage. I was still CTO. I still understood the technology better than anyone. And I still had relationships with our engineers and early employees who remembered that I'd built the foundation of everything we had. I started being more visible, attending meetings I'd previously skipped, building relationships with board members, demonstrating strategic thinking beyond just technical implementation. I documented every decision, every contribution, every piece of value I added, built a portfolio of my work that made it clear how integral I was to the company's success. At the same time, I started subtly undermining Devon's narrative. In board meetings, I'd ask pointed questions about expenses, about ROI on sales and marketing initiatives, about the actual metrics behind his big strategic claims, never accusatory, always framed as genuine curiosity, just trying to understand. I watched Devon squirm as he struggled to provide hard numbers to back up his confident assertions. I also started building a relationship with one of our key investors, a woman named Patricia Chen from the venture firm that had led our Series A. She was sharp, analytical, and increasingly frustrated with Devon's lack of financial rigor. "I appreciate that Devon is an excellent salesman," she said during a private coffee meeting in February. "But we need more than vision at this stage. We need execution, accountability." "I agree completely," I said. "I think we have some opportunities to tighten our processes." "I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, formally. Would you be willing to put together a presentation for the board on operational efficiency?" "Absolutely." Devon didn't know about that meeting, didn't know I was building my own relationship with our investors, didn't know I was slowly repositioning myself from technical implementer to strategic leader. He still thought he was in control. In March 2019, I made my first real move. I went to Rachel, not to tell her about the affairs, not yet. I wasn't ready for that level of destruction, but I planted seeds. Sophie and I invited Rachel and Devon over for dinner. During the evening, I casually mentioned that I'd noticed Devon seemed stressed lately. "Oh," Rachel said, glancing at her husband. "You haven't mentioned anything." "It's just the fundraising," Devon said quickly. "Lots of pressure?" "Must be tough," I said sympathetically. "All those late meetings, the travel. I don't know how you manage it." "What travel?" Rachel asked. Devon's eyes flicked to me, then back to Rachel. "Just a few investor trips, nothing major." "He was in Seattle twice last month," I said helpfully. "San Francisco 3 times, working incredibly hard." I hadn't been in Seattle or San Francisco, but Rachel didn't know that. I watched her face, saw the tiny flicker of doubt, the question forming in her mind. "You didn't mention Seattle," she said to Devon. "Didn't I? Must have slipped my mind. It was just a day trip." "2-day trips," I corrected, smiling. "But I'm sure it all blurs together when you're that busy." The seed was planted. Rachel wouldn't confront him based on that alone. But she'd start paying attention, start noticing when his stories didn't quite add up. Over the next few weeks, I did it again, mentioned business trips that hadn't happened, evening meetings that seemed to run suspiciously late, client dinners that weren't on the calendar. Always casual, always friendly, just making conversation. I watched Rachel's expression change over time, watched the trust start to erode. I felt guilty. Rachel didn't deserve this indirect cruelty, but she didn't deserve a cheating husband either. And this was necessary for what came next. In April, I escalated. I went to Janet, our CFO, and told her I was concerned about expense irregularities. Asked her to do a comprehensive audit of all executive spending for the past year. "Are you sure?" she asked. "That's going to create tension if people feel like they're being investigated." "I'm sure," I said. "We have fiduciary responsibilities and we're about to close a major funding round. We need everything clean and documented." She agreed. Over the next 2 weeks, she compiled a detailed report. The numbers were damning. Devon had expensed over $47,000 in questionable charges over 12 months. Restaurants with no documented business purpose, hotels in cities where we had no clients, car services that didn't align with any scheduled meetings. Janet presented her findings to me first. "This is, significant," she said. "I'll need to report this to the board." "I know," I said. "Let's handle it correctly. Can you put together a formal report with all the documentation? I'll schedule a special board meeting." "You're not going to talk to Devon first?" This is beyond a conversation between friends, I said. This is a governance issue. The board meeting was scheduled for May 3rd. I told Devon it was a standard quarterly review. He had no idea what was coming. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. This was it, the point of no return. Part of me still wanted to pull back, to talk to Devon one more time, to give him a chance to explain, to apologize, to fix this. But then I remembered his face when he suggested bringing in a new CTO, his casual willingness to push me aside, his complete lack of guilt about lying to everyone who trusted him. He'd made his choices, now he'd face the consequences. The board meeting started normally. Financial updates, metric reviews, strategic discussions. Devon presented his vision for our next phase of growth. He was confident, charismatic, completely in his element. Then I said, "Before we adjourn, there's one more item on the agenda. Janet has prepared a report on expense compliance that the board needs to review." Devon's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten slightly. Janet distributed copies of her report. 43 pages of detailed documentation, every questionable charge highlighted, every missing receipt noted, every inconsistency catalogued. The board members read in silence. The atmosphere in the room shifted, became heavy. Patricia Chen spoke first. "Devon, can you explain these charges?" "I'd need to review them in detail," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "But I'm sure there are reasonable explanations for everything." "A hotel room in Portland for 4 hours?" Patricia read from the report. "Charged to the company, but with no corresponding client." "Meeting or business purpose?" "Sometimes I need a quiet space to work on sensitive negotiations. Hotels offer privacy." "For 4 hours in the middle of the afternoon?" "I can provide context for each of these charges if given time to—" "There are dozens of them, Devon." Patricia's voice was cold. "Over the course of a year, this isn't an accounting error. This is a pattern." I watched Devon's composure start to crack, watched him realize how serious this was. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "Aaron, can we discuss this privately before—" "This is a board matter," I said quietly. "It's been a private discussion." For the first time I saw faith and something else. He understood that this wasn't an accident, that I'd orchestrated this. "Are you fucking kidding me?" he said, his professional mask slipping. "You're doing this here?" "I'm doing my job as CTO and board member, ensuring financial compliance." "What? This is bullshit, and you know it. These charges are legitimate business expenses that—" "Then you'll have no problem providing documentation," Patricia interrupted, "along with detailed explanations for each one. We'll need that within 48 hours. Devon looked around the table, saw the doubt on every face, realized he was cornered. "Fine," he said, "I'll provide whatever documentation you need." But we both knew he couldn't because the charges weren't legitimate. And there was no documentation that would prove otherwise. The meeting ended shortly after. Devon left immediately. Didn't look at me. I stayed behind to talk with Patricia. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," she said. "This is exactly the kind of oversight we need." "I just want to protect the company," I said. "I know, and I appreciate it. Between you and me, Aaron, we've been concerned about Devon's leadership for a while. This just confirms our instincts." My plan was working. Over the next 2 weeks, Devon scrambled to provide explanations for his expenses. Some of them were plausible, many were clearly fabricated. The board conducted a formal investigation, brought in outside auditors, interviewed employees. The more they dug, the worse it looked. They also discovered what I'd already known, that Devon had been having private conversations with certain investors about company direction, conversations that excluded me and other board members, conversations that suggested he was trying to consolidate power. In late May, the board made their decision. Devon would be required to repay all questionable expenses, approximately $47,000. He would be placed on a formal performance improvement plan. His discretionary spending authority would be severely limited, and he would be required to undergo executive coaching. It was humiliating but not fatal. He still had his job, still had his title, but his reputation was damaged, his autonomy was gone, and I was positioned as the responsible, trustworthy leader who'd put company integrity above personal relationships. But I wasn't done. This was just the beginning. June through September 2019 was a period of psychological warfare. I became Devon's closest colleague and his greatest obstacle, always professional, always respectful, never overtly hostile. But I made sure every decision he wanted to make went through additional scrutiny. Every initiative he proposed faced detailed questioning. Every expense required multiple approvals. I positioned myself as the voice of caution and prudence while making him look reckless and impulsive by comparison. In meetings, I'd let him speak first, then point out flaws in his logic. Not aggressively, just thoughtfully, reasonably, asking questions he couldn't answer, highlighting risks he hadn't considered. I watched him become increasingly frustrated, increasingly defensive. His natural charisma started to feel like compensation rather than confidence, and I continued planting seeds with Rachel. "Is Devon okay?" I asked her during a dinner in July. "He seems on edge lately." "He's under a lot of stress with the board situation," she said. "I know. I feel terrible about that whole thing. I didn't want it to become such an ordeal." "It's not your fault. He should have been more careful." "Still, it's affected our friendship. We used to be so close, and now there's this distance." "Give it time," Rachel said. "You two have been through worse." But we both knew that wasn't true. We'd never been through anything like this. I kept mentioning inconsistencies in Devon's schedule, asking innocent questions about where he'd been, what he'd been doing, never accusing, just creating doubt. I could see Rachel pulling away from him, see the questions in her eyes when he came home late, see the way she checked his phone when she thought no one was watching. The foundation of their marriage was cracking. Not because of anything I'd said directly, but because once doubt enters a relationship, it grows on its own. In October 2019, I made my next major move. I scheduled a private meeting with Patricia Chen and the two other lead investors. "I want to talk about the company's future," I said, "specifically about leadership structure." "Go ahead," Patricia said. "I think we need to seriously consider whether our current CEO structure is serving the company's best interests." I let that hang in the air, watched them process it. "You're suggesting we replace Devon," Patricia said. "I'm suggesting we evaluate whether the CEO role should be structured differently. Devon is an excellent salesman and visionary, but we're at a stage where we need disciplined execution, financial rigor, operational excellence." "And you think you can provide that?" "I think I've demonstrated that I can. I've been managing the technical organization, improving our processes, building investor relationships. I've shown I can lead at scale. This is a significant conversation, Aaron. I know, and I'm not suggesting we do anything rash, but I think we need to consider what's best for the company, not what's most comfortable. They agreed to think about it, to evaluate our performance objectively. Over the next few months, I made sure that evaluation favored me. I delivered consistently, hit every technical milestone, improved team performance metrics, reduced operational costs, built relationships with key clients. Meanwhile, I made sure Devon's missteps were visible, not through sabotage. I didn't need to sabotage him. I just needed to stop covering for him. When he made promises to clients that were technically unfeasible, I didn't quietly fix it. I documented the gap between promise and reality. When he pushed for expensive initiatives without proper ROI analysis, I asked for detailed financial projections in board meetings. When he tried to blame technical delays for sales shortfalls, I provided data showing the delays were due to constantly changing requirements from the sales team. I was methodical, patient, professional, and devastating. In January 2020, just as the world was starting to hear about a virus in China, the board called a special meeting. Devon and I were both invited. We sat across from each other in the conference room, the tension palpable. Patricia led the conversation. "We've been evaluating our leadership structure for several months," she said, "and we've come to a decision." I kept my face neutral. Devon looked nervous. "Effective immediately? We're implementing a co-CEO structure. Devon will remain CEO with primary responsibility for sales, marketing, and strategic partnerships. Aaron will be promoted to co-CEO with primary responsibility for operations, technology, and financial oversight." Devon's face went pale. "Co-CEO? We believe this structure plays to both of your strengths," Patricia continued. "Devon, you're exceptional at vision and growth. Aaron, you're exceptional at execution and discipline. Together, you'll provide the balanced leadership we need." "This wasn't discussed with me," Devon said. "We're discussing it now. This is the board's decision." I said nothing, just sat there watching Devon realize he'd been outmaneuvered. The meeting ended. Devon walked out without speaking to me. I'd achieved the first major victory. I wasn't being pushed out. I was being elevated. But Devon still had his title, his salary, his equity. He was diminished but not destroyed. That would come next. The co-CEO structure was designed to fail, and I made sure it failed on Devon's side. Every decision required both of us to agree, which meant Devon couldn't make any significant moves without my approval. And I made sure to find reasonable objections to anything. New sales initiative. It's in the detail. Let's make sure it aligns with our brand guidelines and doesn't overpromise. Strategic partnership. Let's review the contract terms carefully and ensure the technical integration is feasible. Everything slowed down. Everything became bureaucratic. Everything frustrated Devon. Meanwhile, I ensured the technical and operational side of the business ran smoothly, hit our targets, improved efficiency, demonstrated clear, measurable value. In board meetings, the contrast was stark. I'd present clean data showing operational improvements. Devon would present optimistic projections that didn't materialize. I'd propose initiatives that succeeded. He'd propose initiatives that got bogged down in process. It wasn't sabotage. It was just me doing my job exceptionally well while not helping him do his. The board noticed. "Aaron, your operational metrics are excellent," Patricia said during a March board meeting. "We're seeing real efficiency gains." Thank you, the team has worked hard. Devon, we're not seeing the same momentum on the sales side. What's the issue? The co-CEO structure creates decision-making bottlenecks, Devon said, frustration clear in his voice. We can't move fast enough. Fast isn't always better than right, I said mildly. We've been burned by moving too quickly without proper analysis. I watched Devon's jaw clench, watched him struggle to respond without sounding defensive. This was the game now. Death by 1,000 cuts. Every meeting, every decision, every interaction was an opportunity to make him look worse by comparison. Then COVID-19 hit. March 2020 changed everything. The world shut down, businesses struggled, everyone went remote. For prison work, it was actually good. Creative agencies needed better remote collaboration tools. Our product became more valuable, not less. But the crisis created opportunity for me to demonstrate leadership. I immediately organized our pandemic response. Got everyone set up to work from home, implemented new communication protocols, adjusted our product roadmap to address new client needs. I held all-hands meetings every week, calm, reassuring, practical, gave people clarity in uncertain times. Devon struggled. His strength was in-person charisma. Zoom meetings weren't his medium. He seemed diminished on screen, less commanding, less confident. I watched him fade into the background while I stepped forward. By June 2020, it was clear to everyone who was really running the company. And I still wasn't done with him. In July 2020, I went to Rachel. We met for coffee, safely distanced, masked, outside. She looked tired. The pandemic had been hard on everyone, but I could see it was more than that. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Honestly, not great." She hesitated. "Then, can I ask you something about Devon?" "Of course." "Has he seemed different to you? Distant?" I chose my words carefully. The pandemic has been stressful for everyone. It's not just the pandemic. It's been longer than that. Since last year, he's just not present anymore, not with me. This was my moment. "Rachel, there's something I need to tell you. I've been wrestling with whether to say anything, but you're my friend, and you deserve to know." I watched her face go pale. "What is it?" I pulled out my phone, opened the folder I'd been building for over a year. Gary's investigation photos, screenshots of hotel charges, credit card statements. "Devon's been having affairs," I said quietly. "Multiple affairs for at least 2 years." I showed her everything, watched her face crumble. Watched 18 months of accumulated doubt crystallize into devastating certainty. She cried. I comforted her, told her I was sorry, told her I'd wanted to tell her sooner but didn't know how. "I trusted him," she said through tears. "We'd been married for 3 years. I thought we were happy." "I know, I'm so sorry." "Does Sophie know?" "I haven't told anyone. I wanted you to hear it from me first." She looked at the photos again, at the evidence of her husband's betrayal. "I need to go," she said. "Of course. Call me if you need anything." She left. I sat there for a while, finishing my coffee, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction but wasn't quite guilt either. Devon's marriage was over. I'd made sure of that. Rachel confronted Devon that night. I know, because he called me at 11 p.m, absolutely furious. "You fucking told her." She asked me a direct question, I said calmly. What was I supposed to do? Lie? "You've been planning this, all of it. The board investigation, the co-CEO bullshit, now this. You're trying to destroy me." I'm trying to run a company. You destroyed yourself, Devon. We were supposed to be friends. We were. Until you decided I was disposable, until you decided to push me out while using company money to fund your affairs. I never tried to push you out. Don't lie to me. I have documentation of every meeting you had with investors behind my back, every conversation about marginalizing me. I know everything. Silence. Then, what do you want, Aaron? I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything: your marriage, your credibility, your control of the company, everything you took for granted while you were too busy fucking your way through our client list. You're insane. No, I'm just done protecting you from the consequences of your choices. I hung up. Rachel filed for divorce in August 2020. It was ugly. The affairs became semi-public. Devon's reputation took another hit. His performance at work deteriorated. He became erratic, defensive, sometimes not showing up for meetings. The board noticed. In September, Patricia called me privately. "We need to make a change," she said. "The co-CEO structure isn't working." I agree. We're going to restructure. You'll become sole CEO. Devon will transition to an advisory role, maintain his equity, but step back from day-to-day operations. When? We'll announce it at the next board meeting. Understood. I'd won. Completely, totally won. Devon was being removed from the company we'd built together. I was taking full control, but I still wasn't satisfied because Devon would still have his equity, would still be wealthy when we eventually exited, would still benefit from everything we'd built. That wasn't enough. I wanted total destruction. So I started on the final phase of my plan. Over the next year, while Devon faded into irrelevance and I ran the company, I began constructing the most elaborate part of my revenge. I started creating financial irregularities in the company's accounting. Nothing large enough to trigger immediate alarms, just small discrepancies, inconsistencies, questionable transactions. And I made sure every single one could be traced back to Devon. I used his old login credentials, routed transactions through accounts he had access to, created a trail of digital breadcrumbs that pointed to him. It was painstaking work. Took months of careful planning. I had to be absolutely certain that nothing would point back to me. I worked with Janet to discover these irregularities, expressed concern, suggested we bring in forensic accountants. The investigation I'd orchestrated revealed exactly what I'd planted: systematic financial manipulation, funds being moved inappropriately, revenue being recognized improperly, expenses being hidden, all traced to Devon's access and approval. It looked like he'd been embezzling, cooking the books, committing actual fraud. "I can't believe this," I said to Patricia when the forensic report came in. "After everything, he was actually stealing from the company." "The evidence is clear," she said. "We need to report this to the authorities." "Are you sure? That's a criminal matter." "We have a legal obligation. This isn't just poor judgment. This is criminal." Let the board make the decision. Kept my hands clean. In January 2022, the company filed a formal complaint with federal prosecutors. Devon was informed he was under investigation for embezzlement and securities fraud. He called me immediately. "This is you," he said. "You fucking did this. I didn't embezzle anything." The forensic accounting tells a different story. You planted that evidence. Somehow you planted all of it. "Devon, you sound paranoid. Maybe you should talk to a lawyer." I am talking to a lawyer, but you and I both know what really happened here. You framed me. I documented financial irregularities that the board had a legal obligation to report. Everything else is just evidence. Why? His voice broke. Why are you doing this to me? I know I fucked up. I know I hurt you, but this is insane. You tried to erase me from my own company. You betrayed everyone who trusted you. You deserve everything that's happening. I'm sorry, he said, and I could hear him crying. Aaron, I'm sorry. I was an asshole. I was selfish, but I never wanted this. Please, you can stop this. Tell them the truth. I am telling them the truth. You embezzled from the company. The evidence proves it. The evidence is fake. Prove it. He couldn't, because I'd been too careful. Devon was indicted in March 2022. Federal charges, securities fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement. His face was on the news. The story made tech industry blogs. Startup CEO accused of defrauding own company. His lawyer tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every transaction traced back to him, every irregularity tied to his access and authority. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified as a witness, the faithful co-founder who'd discovered the fraud. I came across as credible, sympathetic, hurt by my friend's betrayal. The jury deliberated for 3 days, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. I sat in the courtroom when the sentence was read, watched Devon's face go blank, watched him being led away in handcuffs. Rachel wasn't there. She'd moved to California after the divorce, wanted nothing to do with him. I was one of the only people from his old life who showed up. As he was being led out, he looked at me. Our eyes met. He didn't look angry anymore, just defeated, broken. I felt nothing. That was almost 3 years ago now. Prison work continued to grow. We raised our Series C, expanded to 200 employees. I'm the sole AZEO, the vision and the execution, respected in the industry. I bought out Devon's equity for pennies on the dollar, distressed asset sale through his bankruptcy proceedings. He's in federal prison in Oregon serving his sentence. I've never visited him, never written, cut him out of my life as completely as he tried to cut me out of the company. Sophie knows most of what happened, not everything, not the extent of my manipulation, not how carefully I constructed Devon's downfall, but enough. Do you ever feel guilty? She asked me once. No, I said, and I meant it. Devon made his choices. I just made sure he faced the full consequences. I'm sitting on that same beach in Thailand now, exactly where I was when Devon was arrested. I come here once a year on the anniversary. A reminder. The sunset is beautiful. The drink is cold. Everything is perfect. My phone buzzes. An email from Gary, the private investigator I'd hired all those years ago. He still keeps tabs on Devon for me. Subject, update on DH. I open it. Devon Hartley was released from federal prison yesterday on early parole for good behaviour, served 5 years of his 8-year sentence, current whereabouts unknown. I stare at the message for a long time. Released. After everything I did, everything I took from him, he's out, free. Maybe planning his own life, maybe thinking about revenge. I should feel something. Concern, fear, satisfaction. But I feel empty, because I realize that destroying Devon didn't fix anything, didn't heal the betrayal, didn't make me whole again. I lost my best friend twice, once to his betrayal, once to my revenge, and I don't know which loss was worse. I close the email, finish my drink, watch the sun disappear below the horizon, Tomorrow I fly back to Portland, back to the company, back to the success I fought so hard for. But tonight, sitting alone on this beach, I wonder if winning was worth what it cost me. The answer should be yes. I just wish I believed it.